so much. Happy New Year, everybody. Good to be here with you at the January 13th Apex Planning Board meeting. Call the meeting to order and ask for a moment of silence, please. All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Diane, are there items of information?
Yes, good afternoon. So we just wanted to let everyone know that there's a public engagement period open for the Wake Transit plan that's being led by Campo. It's open through January 31st. And this plan guides how approximately $1 billion in transit funding will be spent in Wake County over the next 10 years. So your input can be shared at www.publicinput.com/WTPP1. And then second, the Apex Mobility Hub project is moving forward. DOT and Town of Apex are hosting a second public meeting to share concepts for the future mobility hub planned along the S-Line Railroad Corridor. And so this is an in-person meeting at the Apex Senior Center in the Salem Room on February 26th from 4 to 6 p.m. And you can get more information at www.publicinput.com/Apex Hub. And finally, we wanted to make note of the fact that the construction of the Saunders lot is underway. The town's implemented many measures to mitigate the temporary loss of parking during construction, with more planned soon. Learn about the new free park and ride shuttle and other mitigation measures at www.apexnc.org/lot. That's it.
I'm going to open the floor for public comments. Public comment is to allow the public to speak on items that do not appear on the agenda under public hearings. Any member of the public who wishes to speak can sign up. And here we don't have anybody signed up, so give it a moment, see if anybody. All right. With that, I'm going to close public comments and move to consent item number 1, approving the minutes from our December 9th regular meeting. Anyone had an opportunity to review?
I'd like to make a motion to approve last month's meeting minutes.
Thank you.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. All right, we're going to move on to public hearings. The public hearing is an opportunity for the public to speak on the items listed below. Again, if you have not listed on the agenda, if you've not had an opportunity to sign up and speak, please do. It will be an opportunity for individuals to speak for 3 minutes, and when that 3 minutes is up, I will kindly ask you to wrap up your minutes. If there are a group of you available who wish to speak, this applies to both neighbors and applicants. If there is a group of you that wish to speak, you will have 9 minutes, and just ask that you not replicate comments. All right, so with that, we're going to move to item number 1. Angela.
Good afternoon. Angela Reinke, Parks Planning Manager. This is a public hearing for a possible motion to adopt the master plan for parks, recreation, cultural resources, greenways, and open space. In late 2021, the Parks Planning staff began an update to the 2014 Parks, Recreation, Greenways, and Open Space Master Plan. The planning process included data collection and analysis of existing park and facility conditions and included establishing goals, developing guiding principles and recommendations, and developing an implementation and action plan. The final plan was guided by town staff, Apex residents, town council, the Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources Advisory Commission, Wake and Chatham County staff, and adjacent municipality staff, among others. The newly titled Master Plan for Parks, Recreation, Cultural Resources, Greenways, and Open Space serves as a guide for the Parks and Recreation Cultural Resources Department for their 10-year span of 2023 to 2023. The master plan was presented and discussed at both Planning Board and Town Council in 2023, but the advertisement for the public hearing did not appropriately identify the adoption of the master plan. So this presentation is being made so that we can request that it be formally adopted pursuant to the provisions of North Carolina's general statutes and to the Town of Apex Unified Development Ordinance. On May 9th, 2023, transportation plan amendments related to public greenways and street-side greenways, along with the master plan map amendments, were adopted by Town Council, adding 2 new categories for the identification and acquisition of property for future parks and indoor recreation. This is the bicycle and pedestrian systems plan map that indicates the approved greenway and street-side greenway alignments that are associated with the master plan and were adopted in May of 2023. And they're used by staff for making recommendations during rezoning, subdivision, and site plan approvals for requiring greenway to be constructed with development. This map is jointly updated by Planning and Parks, Recreation, Coastal Resources when transportation plan amendments are approved. When the Western Big Branch Area Plan transportation amendments are presented during the January 28th Town Council meeting, this map will be updated to reflect approved changes to align with that plan. And this is the future parkland and indoor facility search area map. It was also adopted in May of 2023, and this map has not changed. This shows the 2 types of search locations for acquiring lands for parks and indoor facilities for our parks and recreation programming. The entire master plan and these maps are published in the town's website for viewing by the public, and a public hearing is planned for the town council meeting to be held on January 28th. The Parks and Recreation Resources Advisory Commission and town staff recommend approval of the master plan, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions?
This is purely administrative.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right. If there are no questions from the board, I will open up the public hearing. Do we have anybody signed up to speak? Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Bill Gentry, and I apologize.
Kathy Restivo.
Kathy, thank you so much.
I am Kathy Restivo. I live at 8528 Reagan Road. And we live in an old historic house that is protected by the state, local, and national historic provisions. And I just want to make sure that the status of the Reagan Road side path it was abandoned. I want to make sure that it's still that way, because on the map, it shows us a potential for you to go through our property. And Diane Kin, is that how she, Kin? Okay. At the July 10th meeting in 2023, she said that the project was abandoned because of the historic nature, as well as the wildlife and their requirements for their constituents, which are hunters. So could you update me just on the status of that? Because we're, it's our land.
Yeah. I appreciate your, did you have something?
The master plan still shows that the path is going to go right through the middle of our property.
So it hasn't been amended.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure it is amended unless something is different. And the mayor has assured us that it will not go through. So can I get an assurance from y'all?
Well, I'll ask if you have any additional comments, but after that, I'll see if anybody else registered, but I also make sure nobody else, and then we'll try to get your questions answered.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
You are very welcome. Thank you. I do not have anybody else registered, but I'm wondering if there is anybody else who wanted to speak on this? Angela, I will look to you to see if you can answer.
So, I'll go back to this map. The side path project was abandoned. And I believe, unless it's in the master plan document, which is I want to call it a stagnant document. So the exhibits that were in the big book plan do not get updated with these map system plan. So I know that there's some like continued street side greenway on the south side of Reagan Road and some side path that exists and is planned on the north side of Reagan Road. But I believe that the plans removed in updates to the map removed that connection point. But we will make sure that, because those went through as a separate map amendment, and so we'll make sure, but the exhibits from the book document won't be updated because the plan is adopted with exhibits that existed in 2023. These maps we update, and that's our working document.
So those documents are null and void? Is
No,
that-
it's just think of it as a plan has maps, and the maps get updated, but the planning document that occurred is as it was existed when it was adopted. So that's why we're readopting the plan as it existed in May of 23, and then the map exhibits that have updated it, those continue to be updated, and so it's really only the map, these two maps that change over time.
Okay.
And so the plan could have exhibits, like snippets of maps that were done in 2023 that have been updated since then. But the plan has to be adopted in its form, and then we update these maps.
So do I understand correctly that the updated map, not the updated plan, the updated map does not include
That's correct.
going through their property? Is there,
I don't think it's been changed yet. So we're going to be starting a comprehensive plan update process. We're working to hire a consultant right now. It's an 18-month process. And that will be one of the things that gets taken. It'll be rerouted probably, not taken off. But we need to go through the study in order to do that. But because of the Army Corps of Engineers restrictions, you only can have a 4-foot non-paved path. We can't do a project to connect to the American Tobacco Trail. And your property is in between Reagan Road and the American Tobacco Trail, correct? Yes.
Ours is the historic site.
Yeah.
in Wake County.
Yeah, I'm Diane. I'm Diane.
this is Diana Penn.
So, no.
Gotcha, okay.
So,
So you will
it's-
not be going through our property. That's the most critical thing that we need to know.
it's a little bit because of the historic, but it's a lot because of the Army Corps restrictions. And so we're going to look and see if there's a different route to take.
We recommended several to the mayor. I don't know.
And we've looked at those, but we want to go through the public process because there's other property owners who may want to comment. And so through our comprehensive plan process, we will be updating the bicycle and pedestrian system plan map, which is the map that Angela's referring to. That's the one that guides development.
Right, and that will be updated so that
I think it will be rerouted, yes, because it doesn't make any sense to go through your property because we can't get to the American Tobacco Trail through there.
right, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
And the government, the federal government requires, the federal government requires that you would do a study to even think about changing.
No, I don't think that's the case. It's just that the rules they have, it's a 4-foot unpaved path. It doesn't meet ADA. It doesn't make any sense for us to do that. So we will be working on it, but the town project has been
Abandoned.
stopped. Yeah, we're not doing that project.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a bit of a clarifying question? Just so I make sure I understand, that at the moment, the plan in concept has been abandoned, but it needs to work itself through the system. Do I understand that correctly?
Yes, we know that it's not going to go on the route that's shown on the map. We don't know where it's going to get moved to because we haven't gone through the process yet.
And
So
so-
once we go through that process, we'll know where it gets moved.
So we should keep our neighbors informed about that process, and the other neighbors as well, who will have concerns about exactly where it's going to be rerouted.
So we don't reach out individually, but you can sign up for all long-range planning updates on our website. And if you want to come over and give me your email, I can make sure you can sign yourself up, and that's for everyone in the public can sign up for these updates.
Right, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Diane.
Yep.
Thank you, Angela. Are there any additional folks who want to speak on this matter? All right. Hearing that, I will close public comment. Welcome, and open it up for discussion and possible motion.
I make a motion to approve.
Thank you.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, thank you so much, and thank you, Diane and Angela. All right, item number 2, Lauren, public hearing of possible motion regarding rezoning case 242CZ15 Green Level Towns.
Yes, good afternoon and Happy New Year's, everyone. This is rezoning case 24CZ15, Green Level Towns PUD, located at 7924 Green Level Church Road. The property is located in this general northwestern part of Apex in the ETJ. The property to be rezoned is located on the east side of Green Level Church Road, north of Greenmore subdivision, which is adjacent to HOA common area in single-family lots, and south of Crestmont subdivision, adjacent to approximately 130 feet of combined RCA and easements. The property is currently zoned rural residential, and the adjacent zonings are to the north, medium density conditional zoning and a sliver of rural residential. To the east and south is planned unit development conditional zoning, and to the west is rural residential. The applicant is proposing to rezone the property to planned unit development conditional zoning. The 2045 land use map designates the subject property as medium density residential, and the proposed rezoning is consistent with that land use map classification. The property is approximately 6.035 acres and contains existing residential structures and two 30-foot wide electrical easements. And the property is heavily vegetated along the south and southeastern and east portion of the site. Along the southeastern property line, there is a stream and 2 wetlands. And along the eastern property line has a portion of the 100-foot Town of Apex riparian buffer. The applicant conducted a neighborhood meeting on July 10th and December 12th, 2024. The neighborhood meeting reports are attached in your staff report. A full list of the proposed uses on page 2 of the staff report. The proposed residential uses include single-family, townhouse, duplex, and accessory apartment. There is a zoning condition associated to the accessory apartment that homeowner association covenants shall not restrict the construction of accessory dwelling units. The applicant is proposing a maximum of 32 units. The PUD proposes design controls related to single-family, townhouse, duplex, and recreational facility private. The design controls can be found on page 2 of the staff report. The proposed single-family minimum lot width is 50 feet, and the minimum lot size is 5,000 square feet, and the townhouse minimum lot width is 18 feet. There are specific conditions related to the townhouse use, as you can see referenced on this slide. Townhouse buildings shall not include more than 4 units. Buildings shall not front Hillman Bend, and no townhouse building along Hillman Bend shall exceed 2 stories. A full list of the proposed residential setbacks is on page 3 of the staff report. The project requires a minimum of 30% RCA. If the development has single-family homes and is mass graded, an additional 5% RCA is required. The proposed buffers are a 15-foot type A along the northern and eastern property line, a 30-foot type B along Green Level Church Road. The buffer along the southern property line is a 15-foot type A buffer. If the townhouse or duplex uses are developed, then the buffer located in this location adjacent to single family will be a 30-foot type A, 30-foot type B, and along these single family lots will be a 50-foot type B. This portion will stay as a 15-foot type A since it's not directly adjacent to single family. The project will be using town services. A full list of the architectural conditions can be found on page 4 of the staff report. The residential conditions are what we generally see for a single family, townhouse, and duplex. The first elevation slide shows 2- and 3-story townhouses, and the second elevation slide shows single family and duplex. To summarize the proposed transportation improvement conditions, they are the following. The project shall dedicate right-of-way and widen the eastern half of Green Level Church Road for the length of the property's frontage based on a 4-lane divided thoroughfare typical section with a 10-foot side path. The project shall construct Hillman Bend extension to the existing Crestmont and Greenmore stub streets. If the developer proposes direct public street access to Green Level Church Road, it shall be constructed as a channelized ride-in, ride-out. If developer does not propose direct public street access to Green Level Church Road, a temporary construction entrance shall be located on Green Level Church Road to serve construction traffic access until final subdivision plat. The pedestrian improvements include 5-foot sidewalks on both sides of the Hillman Bend extension. If the single-family homes are constructed, 5-foot sidewalks on both sides of the internal neighborhood street. If townhouses and/or duplexes are constructed, a 5-foot sidewalk on one side of the internal neighborhood street. As mentioned prior, a 10-foot side path on Green Level Church Road for the length of the property's frontage. And if the property does not have driveway access onto Green Level Church Road, the developer shall construct a pedestrian connection to the side path on Green Level Church Road. The Environmental Advisory Board held a meeting with the applicant on October 17th, 2024. The zoning conditions suggested by the EAB are listed on page 8 of the staff report along with the applicant's response to each condition. The PUD proposes 7 environmental conditions that can be found on page 6 of the staff report. And the conditions are such as to reduce irrigation requirements. The project shall select and plant only warm season grasses. And the second example is all homes shall be pre-configured with solar conduit. A letter of impact from Wake County Public School Systems was received for this rezoning and is included in the staff report packet. Wake County Public School Systems indicates that elementary, middle, and high schools within the current assignment area for this rezoning and development are anticipated to have insufficient capacity for future students. School expansion or construction within the next 5 years may address concerns at the middle and high school grade level. Based on the adopted 2021 Apex Affordable Housing Plan and the 2023 Affordable Housing Incentive Zoning Policy, the housing program recommends at least 5% of the residential units or lots to be designated as affordable or workforce housing. The policy recommendation applies to residential and mixed-use rezoning applications that propose 20 or more residential units. The proposed PUD at this time does not include an affordable housing condition. This project will require a fee in lieu at the 2025 rates for any parks and rec fees. The 2045 land use map classifies the subject property as medium density residential, which allows a density up to 7 units an acre. The proposed rezoning to plan unit development conditional zoning is consistent with that medium density residential land use classification. The proposed rezoning is reasonable and in the public interest because it will maintain the character and appearance of the area and provide the flexibility to accommodate the growth in population. The proposed townhouse use is generally consistent and compatible with the surrounding single-family subdivisions. The townhouse use has conditions related to front yard setbacks, architectural standards, limiting townhouse buildings to 4 units, and the townhouse height adjacent to Hillman Bend to 2 stories. The proposed rezoning provides increased buffers along the southern property boundary if the development designs a subdivision with townhouse or duplex units. The increased buffer provides additional separation to the existing single-family lots to preserve the adjacent subdivision's character while providing a cohesive transition in land use types. The proposed townhouse conditions maintain compatibility with the adjacent subdivisions while providing housing type flexibility. The proposed transportation conditions are consistent with the town of Apex's transportation plan and bicycle and pedestrian plan. The rezoning includes constructing an extension to complete Hillman Bend with sidewalk on both sides, which provides additional vehicle and pedestrian connectivity to the area. Planning staff recommends approval of rezoning case 24CZ15, Green Level Towns PUD, as proposed by the applicant. I'm here to answer any questions as well as our applicant who's in the audience. Thank you.
Any questions?
Lauren, I've got a question. Great job on your presentation, by the
Oh,
way.
thank you, sir.
And based on my reading of both of these staff reports, I'm actually going to have the same question for both cases. Now, they may have different answers just based on context. But first, with the affordable housing, can you tell me what is because I understand both projects chose not to include the affordable housing condition. What is the incentive when you speak of the 2023 affordable housing incentive zoning policy?
So and I can always let Amanda or Diane to add or confirm, but there's different incentives. If you provide a certain amount of affordable or different units, you can potentially get, I think, a reduction in buffer or it's like an incentive for doing.
So in general, there's several different incentives that could be considered with the provision of at least 5% RCA. With a PUD, it's a little bit
Housing.
with with affordable housing, with 5% affordable housing. With a PUD, it's a little bit more unique, and because the PUD is a unique zoning condition district, as you're aware, you set the standards at the time, so you're not really getting a reduction in setbacks. You're setting and proposing certain setbacks, but there are other incentives such as increased density above that which the land use map would call for, or a reduction in RCA potentially, or increased building height. So there are some, or even a reduction in the minimum parking standard. So those are some of the incentives that could be considered with that provision of 5% or more.
And the only thing I'll add to that is the affordable, so I'm the planning board's representative at the former, it is going to be disbanded, housing advisory board. And there was a thorough, in-depth conversation around what incentives could be by a wide host of stakeholders. And so they came up with a whole list, and I think Amanda did a good job at covering just a few, a whole list of potential incentives that we hoped would incentivize affordable housing units.
Okay, great, thank you. My other question is really tied to a question that there was a question at the time, and then it led into a pretty lengthy conversation, and so I'm planning and hoping that doesn't happen now. But regarding the dedication of right-of-way and then the widening of Green Level and then ultimately Kelly Road, we had this conversation last year regarding Olive Chapel, and so I was just curious, one, and maybe there's not a need to get into what was the end result with Olive Chapel on this one case. Maybe we could do that after all the business is complete. But curious to hear either from yourself or from engineering as to the requirements of the widening, if we're going from a 2-lane cross section to the 4-lane, what that's going to look like in the interim when north and south of the site are clearly not going to have that kind of widening happening, and really that's it.
Sure, that's a great question. Russell, would you like to talk from the transportation perspective?
Yeah, sure. For this section, obviously the sidewalk and curb will be set back based on that ultimate 4-lane section. So you're going to have a striped out area of pavement. They can make use of some of that pavement. They do have a right in, right out, so you could stripe a right turn lane, an extra lane that drops into that right in, right out. You could stripe additional shoulder for future bike lane if at some point the bike lane precedes the ultimate 4-lane widening. But there will be some area that has to be striped out that's just not not usable until the rest of the road's widened.
Okay, so essentially, there will still be a single through lane. There will just be a what looks like a gigantic shoulder leading over to the face of the curb. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, it'll be striped out shoulder where we can't use additional pavement. That's correct.
Gotcha. Okay, and then that'll go ahead and be piped now, and then it'll be, because I guess it's swale on this and Kelly Road, so it'll be swale to pipe to swale.
It will be curb and gutter, so there'll have to be transitions into that curb and gutter from each end. Obviously, transitions for sidewalk as well. So they'll do as much as they can during subdivision plan and construction plan design process, and we'll review that as will NCDOT.
Sure.
So yeah, it'll be set up as much as we can for ultimate section, and then when the other sections get widened in the future, those tie-ins will have to be adjusted.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Are there additional questions for Lauren? Thank you, Lauren. Thank you. I'm going to open up public hearing, and Mr. Carpenter?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And I have you and a couple of your colleagues here, so.
Yep. They're just here for questions.
They're
So,
just here for
yeah.
questions. All right. So with that, you have 9 minutes, and open public hearing. I have some other folks who are here to speak as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good evening. Matthew Carpenter with Parker Poe, 301 Fayetteville Street in Raleigh. Here this evening on behalf of the property owner and developer. Also with me are Mike Hunter, the property owner and developer, and Brian Richards with Urban Design Partners, our landscape architect. And like I said, they're here if there are any questions. Appreciate Lauren's presentation. I did print some handouts. That I think help sort of summarize this case. Some of the information on there is what Lauren presented, but I wanted to get it all on one page so you can sort of see the summary. And if you look in the top left-hand corner of the exhibit, and I'll pause for just a second so we can hand those out.
I will encourage you to not duplicate Lauren's.
Yeah. The main 3 points of the case are that it's consistent with the land use map, the medium density designation, it's compatible with existing neighborhoods. Most of the staff review time was spent on working through those compatibility issues, because when you have a site like this in between existing single-family development, we try to be hypersensitive, and staff is obviously hypersensitive to compatibility with those neighborhoods. And so those conditions that were added for compatibility are shown in yellow, just to show you each place on the site where a change was made above and beyond what would be required in the UDO. Lauren went through the buffers and also the massing conditions, the 4 units per building condition. That was meant so that when you drive through the neighborhood, there aren't long swaths of townhome buildings that really look funny up against single-family homes. Even if they are townhomes, they're smaller overall buildings. And then the third is construction of the infrastructure. Obviously, the Hillman Bend extension, what was kind of interesting about this is the 2 adjacent subdivisions left those stub streets and sidewalks actually short of our property line. They stop where the red line is on the exhibit. So this project will be going to the north and south and extending those streets onto our property to make the ultimate connection. There are easements that allow that, and we've confirmed it can be done. And then the Green Level Church Road widening, and to also answer the question, we're committing to widening that ultimate section. I know some neighbors also had questions about that. And so it'll be widened to the ultimate transportation plan section, which is a 4-lane divided. And the idea is that over time, obviously, each developer builds their portion and then the street's connected. The alternative being that the town initiates a project and does the whole road at once, which is obviously a whole different policy discussion separate from this case. And then to address your affordable question, because I do think it's a good one, we love incentives, and I think incentives are great policies. And it was, I worked with CJ Valenzuela when the incentives policy was developed, and I think it does a really good job. The difficulty in these legislative rezoning cases, in my experience with the incentives, is that when you're in this type of review, it's really it's expected that you sort of check every box so that you meet RCA, you meet road widening conditions, and so there's not a lot of opportunity to use those incentives because it's really you're asking for a rezoning, and so you need to show that you're going above and beyond, or at least meeting the recommendation in all of these different areas. And in some projects we can do that, and we can make the affordable commitment in addition to all those other things. For a project of this size, it becomes a lot more difficult. And we've got the road widening on Green Level Church. We don't know exactly how much that will cost, and the road extension along Hillman Bend, which is a significant portion of road for such a small project. And then the challenge is also for sale versus for rent affordable units. For rent projects, it's much easier to finance because those are it limits the maximum rent over a long period of time, 20, 30 years. And so those are easier commitments to make. This is a for sale townhome project. And so the affordable condition would result in a maximum for sale affordable price that's generally 30% of the area median income, which includes interest. So then when interest rates go up, it really lowers that price. And so we're not far enough along to know what the market price of these units would be, but my estimate is it would be $100,000 to $100,000 per townhome unit difference between the market price and the for sale affordable price. And so again, for a project of this size, it's difficult to accommodate that and still make the project work. And I think you run up to a point where it's a question of, does the project move forward at all? And I think we're close to that limit here. I don't know exactly where it is, but that's what we're trying to juggle. And so again, we're consistent with the land use map, and we spend a lot of time working with staff. And so for those reasons, we respectfully request your recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Ann Kessler?
Is it okay if my neighbor speaks with us?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Are you Chris?
Yes, I am.
Okay, wonderful.
Yes, ma'am.
We live in the same neighborhood off of Green Level Church.
Right.
You want to start?
I can start. I've been here 5 years now, and I've seen Green Level Church Road, the development along that corridor. It's just been one development after another, and I don't want to be negative, but I'm really opposed to townhomes. I think if I would encourage all of you to drive down the road and take a look at the developments along the road. The two developments, Crestmore and Greenmore, they're all single-family homes. And I would suggest, if you're going to approve something like this, I would X out the townhomes and go with single-family homes and have the entrances, like they were saying, within the two neighborhoods. If you make another entrance on Green Level, it's gonna be more traffic problems on Green Level Church. You talk about compatibility. Well, let's talk about single-family homes. Make them all single-family homes. That way they'll be compatible. And I got to tell you, the road widening, that could be 3 or 4 years from now. You think about that. I mean, there's all kinds of development going on. Road widening, like I said, it could be several years. So.
Excuse me, could you get a little closer to the mic?
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. So, the other thing I would ask the committee here, what affordability? I've been here 5 years. What does everybody consider as affordability? I don't know what these are going to cost, these townhouses. Do you have any idea what they're going to cost? I mean, that's, you can't, if they're only going to be a couple $100,000, I got to tell you, the homes in our area, they're from 700,000 and up. And, you know, if you bring in something that's low, I'm not gonna say low income, but lower cost, what's that gonna do to all the other homeowners in the area? So you can come on if you want. Go ahead.
Yeah, we'd
Yeah,
like your neighbor to speak.
go ahead, Ann.
All right.
So I would say, I'm not gonna say I'm opposed to the project, but I think there needs to be some compromise here. And I think, you know, with single-family homes, we don't need more townhomes. Drive around, there's townhomes everywhere, and apartments.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time. I only found out about this recently, so I just have a few things. Again, is it 32 families moving into this property? Is that the maximum it could be?
It's a maximum of 32 units.
Okay, so in my mind, I'm thinking 64 more cars. And because there is a high school on Green Level West Church.
It's at
or-
Roberts. That's at
On,
Roberts.
I'm sorry, Green Level Church and Roberts. I'm still new, don't know all my streets. The traffic because of the high school is, unless you're going to the high school, don't go on that road on certain times.
Certain hours of the day.
Yeah, it's definitely when the kids start going and then dismissal. It's very hard to negotiate that right there. If you told me it was only going to be 3 houses on there, I would never be here, it would be no problem. But now you're saying 32 families. I'm like, whoa, that's just,
On 6 acres.
it's just very congested roads. And I'm not even sure that you're telling me from what I'm listening to that eventually Green Level West will be widened.
Green Level Church.
I'm sorry, Green Level Church. I don't know when that's going to be, but right now it's 2 lanes with a high school. Now you're telling me possibly 60 more cars there. It's not necessary. Thank you.
Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Anyone who has not signed up who wishes to speak? If not, I'm going to close the public hearing. And there were a couple of questions that surfaced, and so I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about specifically the widening. I learned something in this presentation around widening, so I'm hoping you could share a little bit about what the widening looks like with this, and then how long that takes, and future widening.
Can I piggyback on that question too? When we were doing a case last year on Holt Road, there was some concern about entrances, how close they were. Was wondering if there's a minimum distance.
Yeah, that was one of my questions.
Yeah.
As well. Thank you.
So exit access and whatnot. I think that was a concern. So.
Yeah, so what they've proposed here is a right-in, right-out. So we did review that when they first brought the plan in and had some concerns about location for that. So what we did recommend is a location at least 375 feet north of the existing intersection, provided they've got ample sight distance, which it appears they should have that, but they have to show that during their subdivision plan review and construction plan review process. So we don't necessarily have any safety concerns with that access being there. There is some benefit to the neighbors in that it provides exclusive access to the thoroughfare, so all the traffic in the neighborhood isn't relying on driving on the existing residential streets. But it also does invite the possibility that traffic can travel between the neighborhoods as well. So it provides an alternate route for drivers. So we're not necessarily opposed to that location, but we did provide them an option that if they choose not to do the right-in, right-out, which it's not required for their traffic, that they would at least provide a construction entrance so the construction traffic's not relying on the existing residential streets.
Answer your question.
With the right-in, right-out, are there any requirements? Because I've seen it in some places where you would put a median, like in this case, like on Green Level, to prevent traffic from cutting the corner, and going in the left when it should not be, and all that jazz.
Yeah, our preference is typically a median, so that's what we would look at here. The issue sometimes becomes, a median requires some off-site widening, whereas we do our right-in, right-out pork chop style concrete deflector island. That doesn't require the off-site widening that a median might otherwise require. So during that review process, when they come in with plans, we'll have to look at what options we have. We will at least have the channelized right in, right out on the driveway. If we can't put a median in the middle of the road, if we can do a median, we'll attempt that. The other issue with those medians, usually in a case like this, it's going to be because of there's not widening to the north. It'd be a relatively narrow median, and those are often targets for drivers hitting the signs that we have to put in them to keep them away from them. So there are some negatives to those medians when we put them in a case like this.
There is a medium towards north by Regency, is it Regency Oaks or right? Regency.
Further north, yes.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
tight.
Yeah, we prefer those when we can, but it is a challenge keeping the signs installed on those medians because drivers tend to run them over. That's the best way to ensure people don't turn left, but we'll do the best we can as far as channelizing the driveway itself if we can't get a median in there.
Is there a timeline, or do we know of a timeline of when the whole road will be widened?
We do not. We do recommend ultimate widening now, and based on our transportation plan, because the issue becomes if it's not done now, it becomes much more expensive and much more impactful in the future to the adjacent residents, as well as other things that come into the road, like utility companies. You provide the extra wide right-of-way, but you don't go ahead and do the widening, and then all kinds of things end up coming into the right-of-way that have to be relocated when you actually construct the road. So it's a lot better to go ahead and set it up with that ultimate section from the beginning when you can. So everybody knows where the road's going to be 20 years from now, and you don't have neighbors and utilities and other things that are impacted by that future widening. And the question about what the widening looks like, I mean, it is a median divided road. So if you've been on some of these 4-lane median divided roads, mostly around, Cary or Raleigh, that's pretty much what it looks like. So it's a 4-lane road, landscape median, 6-foot bike lane, and it has sidewalk or side path, offset from that, 1 foot outside the right of way. So it's a pretty wide section long term.
So do I understand temporarily that it's going to be literally widens just north of Creedmoor Path and then come back?
Correct. There'll be taper transition areas back to that section. So there is a fairly short frontage, and there are constraints on each end. So they're going to have to come up with a transition plan to tie in back to the existing road, which may require some construction off-site away from their frontage, but then we'll work to stay within existing and proposed right-of-way as much as possible to avoid additional right-of-way acquisition outside of their frontage.
There's some of that just north of us to our friends and neighbors in Cary, and as a driver, I strongly dislike them.
Yeah.
Especially in this area where it's just such a short amount, and I'm thinking of the same place up north of Cary. It's such a short. I hear that is the way we are widening.
Yeah, if you're referring to the section on Davis Drive, that's particularly wide because it's also adjacent to the railroad track. So not only did they do half the widening, but they'd had to do even more widening to one side because it's asymmetrical. So it looks particularly wide there. It wouldn't be quite that extreme in this case because it's a symmetrical widening section. You're not constrained by a railroad track.
No, this one is grade level, way up.
Okay, so it's a symmetrical type widening, yeah.
Any additional, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to put this up. Any
No, it's
additional
fine.
questions for Russell around the widening?
Would that be me?
If you can make it quick.
So I didn't get an answer for the widening. Are we looking at like?
Ma'am, can you come up to the
Oh,
microphone,
so sorry.
please? Thank you.
Is the widening going to happen like in 5 years, in 10 years? Just like some sort of timeline for green level? Because it really does get very congested, especially with the high school there.
If I understand, the widening will happen immediately.
No, that's just for that
This
section. I'm talking about green level per se, from let's say Jenks to Roberts.
And that's going to be longer.
That's development.
So that's my question, is it like?
As each
Development
property gets
driven.
developed, it gets done as each property gets developed. And
Yeah.
So it's not
also a
really
state
on the
road, correct, Russell?
Yeah, I can respond. So typically a widening like that would be a state TIP project, and there's nothing in the state TIP right now as far as design or construction. So you're looking at well beyond 10 years, probably more like probably closer to 20 years before you'd see that type of project for wholesale widening. So as development comes in, they'll do smaller developments like this, do frontage improvements, and make connections between neighborhoods, which is important for providing drivers alternatives to thoroughfares, especially when you have congested conditions. But over time, like we were saying, development as it comes in, some developments will trigger off-site improvements or intersection improvements that will help in the interim until like a state project can come in and widen the entire roadway. So we're basically filling gaps at this point for the next 10 to 20 years.
I think that answered your question. I know there was another outstanding question, and so I'll invite Mr. Carpenter to come back up. There was an outstanding question around what would these units sell for. I think I can safely answer that we don't know that yet, but Mr. Carpenter, I invite you to come back up if anyone on the board has if you have anything to add to that, and if anyone on the board has additional questions for you.
Sure, yeah, I'll add to that. You're exactly right. We don't know the for sale price because it is market driven, and it's often, I mean, these units won't be built probably for 2 or 3 years from now because we have to go through subdivision plan after this, and then building permits, and then there has to be the horizontal development, which is grading and putting in the road. So we're probably 2 or 3 years from these units being built, but they will be market rate units, and it's not a requirement of the zoning, but this particular developer, the plan for this site is for it to be larger townhomes that will have a higher market price, probably between 2,000 and 3,500 square feet. So they're going to be larger units. They're not sort of a as cheap as we can build them type product. And I think the architectural conditions also reflect that. They'll reflect the quality of other subdivisions in Apex, given the location.
Additional questions for the applicant? Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
All right, with that, I'll bring it back to the board for comments, discussion, and possible motion.
I have to share that I'm kind of torn. I live off of Wimberley, so I often drive this road, and it just recently opened, right? They fixed that bridge. Thank you very much. So the school thing has been an ongoing problem. The schools being insufficient space, and to add that many units in this area, that many families, I'm unsure. I think I need a little bit more persuasion.
Well, I can't always guarantee that every family or individual that moves in is going to have a school-aged child.
I am in favor of the connectivity because that's been an ongoing problem from neighborhoods to neighborhood. So having that extension of the Hillman Bend, that's a straight shot, in my opinion. There are some pros, there are some cons, I feel like. If anyone could share their thoughts.
So, first of all, I appreciate the responses that we got from everybody, and I think, and I appreciate the explanation, I guess for lack of a better term, that Mr. Carpenter gave regarding cost and how that can come into play regarding affordability and other improvements that are required. And I think a lot of this gets out beyond this case and the next case and our policy debates, both at the board level, but also, or maybe primarily with staff. I 100% understand and agree with the requirement that the developers pay to play. I think what is a struggle for me, and this was the struggle I had with Olive Chapel, was knowing that this is not on the TIP, knowing it may not be on the TIP for many, many years, and that we're placing a significant construction cost on a relatively small project that could provide one affordable unit, one or two, and still agreeing with Mr. Carpenter that those are easier to pencil when it's a rental project than a for sale project. I get that. But I think housing affordability is a crisis, obviously nationwide. I would not recommend that we do anything to limit or diminish our architectural conditions and requirements. I think we have an absolutely beautiful housing stock because of that. We have an extraordinary housing stock. And I wouldn't want to do anything to diminish the housing stock or to lessen that. But how do we find ways to kind of pinch that penny and meet some of our other policy obligations? I mean, this will be a relatively short section of road that will sit like that for, potentially 25, 30 years. I get it, and I certainly understand it and agree with Russell that we can go ahead and put a lot of those utilities onto the road at that time. And I would really even agree more so when it is a locally maintained road. If this was a Apex road, to me personally, and I'm not, sitting here trying to spend the state's money, but if this was a local road, I feel like it's a different story than when it's a state maintained road. So again, that's kind of my concern, and that doesn't mean we would necessarily get an affordable unit out of it with this condition not being there. I understand it. I just think it's a conversation that either the commission or the staff should be having, and I'm sure they've already had them. But I feel a responsibility to at least mention that. I do agree with the connection to the existing stubs. If those were not provided, I think that's an absolute no-brainer. And I certainly understand and respect where you're coming from in terms of our school crowding. We're lucky to have that problem. It's not a good problem, but we're lucky to have that problem. And I do think that our future land use plan calls for this area to be what they're asking for. And so I'm in support of the rezoning just with my particular, and I'm still going to support the conditions as presented. I think as a board, we have that ability and that responsibility to just kind of chew through some of this stuff.
I'd like to respond to one of your comments. I'd be cautious in saying we're lucky to have a school crowding problem. I don't know if you have school-age children, but if you talk to families who have school-age children, they may not say that same thing. We have a lot of concerns and a lot of questions and a lot of complaints around the challenges that families face when they move in and schools are capped and they have to drive past. So I wanna start there.
Well, since you
yes,
just if you're going to move on, allow me to at least respond that yes, I in fact do. I have an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old, so I'm in the system. I'm in a school that was capped, so 100% I get it. I think that the intent behind my comment, and hopefully everyone else understood that was we are a rapidly growing community and a beautiful community, and one that is highly sought. And so does that put a lot on our school board? Absolutely. But we are a highly sought community, and that's exactly what I meant.
I will only say that words matter. I appreciate the
Sure.
intent, but considerate of all families who are facing challenges around.
Absolutely.
Right. So building on that, for me, I'm with you. I'm torn for all the reasons you named. And I think the only thing I would add is I see the balance that's going on here, and I appreciate you raising concerns around what is affordable housing. We do need to have, not this board necessarily, but the council needs to have conversations around what our priorities are as it relates to affordable housing. That may help us put a dent. I think the Housing Affordability Board attempted to do some work around that. I think there is work, but I think there's some deeper policy discussions that need to happen around what are our give and takes. Because I think we're, in this project in particular, we're presented with all of the conflicts that make it hard, and I'm not sure which conflict we give or don't give or waiver. I appreciate your comments on the standards, but it is a real challenge, and we have to have some policy discussions around that. I appreciate the thoughtfulness that has been put in all of these balances. I can see it. I could see it when I reviewed it over the weekend. But this conversation, particularly around the widening of the road, has me incredibly concerned with the balance of school and the balance of just the number of families in this very small unit space. And I want to name that this is what the UDO calls for. So I think that whether this project passes or not, this particular parcel is going to be a challenge as we move forward. So whether it passes this time from this board and the council, this parcel is going to be a challenge. At the moment, I am leaning towards voting against the project.
I'm in favor of the land use. Again, it's compatible with the land use, future land use. The discussion on the roadway, I could go either way, but when it comes to the land use, I think they've provided adequate stipulations within the PUD proposal. I think the density matches the area, which is growing residentially and commercially. As you all know, Publix owns land at Green Level and Green Level West. So their Duke is just down the street. So there is a lot of growth in the area. And I don't think that we should make decisions. I'm not going to make a decision based on people that I don't know and their housing choices and their children or not children. So I'm making this decision on a land use basis. And I will say that the connection of Hillman there, crossing that bit of wet land would deter a lot of people from developing this, but they're pushing forward and they're going to connect that. So I think that's, and they're going beyond what their parcel borders. So I think that that's a great benefit. Again, that interconnectivity between neighborhoods is a positive. So with that, I'll make a motion to approve. I don't have the CZ. How good am I?
15.
CZ 24 CZ 15. Thank you, Sarah.
Can I ask a question?
At this point in time, we've shut conversation. Apologies.
Thank you.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
A second.
I don't know who caught that one.
Me and Daniel both.
Stephen, second.
Okay, thank you. All right, before I call for a vote, I will just add that for my board members and for the audience, I actually, the UDO and the 2045 land use map is my North Star. The UDO is the staff's North Star. I vote where I hear and see as I'm out in the community, so I do listen to what folks are saying about how their children and traffic, and that's where I vote. That is not where everybody on this board votes, but I just wanted to name that we all are coming at it from different perspectives, and that is the amazingness of this board. And so I just wanted to name that.
I do want to make a comment as well. You know, this is a tough parcel, and I do, you know, the connectivity does look good. The road widening, I see that, but also see the property across the street, which is the Yates property. If that were to ever develop, that would take a huge section to, you know, widen that. I mean, that's, yeah. But I also see a compatibility issue too. I mean, it's just kind of tough seeing what these homes are, beautiful homes that are right up next to it. I don't know exactly what the product is going to look like. I can see where it would be much more beneficial to the neighborhood as far as compatibility to be single family homes. I know that's not exactly what a developer wants to hear, because obviously it's about, you know, they've spent money to purchase a property. It looks like they bought it in the last year. They want to be able to capitalize on that investment. But that's not always the neighbor's issue. So sometimes we're trying to pack something in to make sure that the project is profitable at the expense of the neighbors. And that's tough. So I see it both ways. I'm also torn on this one as well. It's not as clear and cut. The next one that we're looking at, I think it looks a lot more compatible with townhomes already in the area. I'm looking at a site map. I don't see any townhomes really in this area, nothing of that high density on that small of a piece of parcel of land. So just from a compatibility standpoint, I'd say it just doesn't fit. But I do appreciate the connectivity of it, so I'm kind of torn on this one, so I'm not quite ready to cast my vote. If we can have some more discussion upon this.
I want to chime in on that point too, because like I agree, you know, like the compatibility issue is there, and it was mentioned earlier, single family homes versus townhomes, and I see that, but I also see, you know, we have a lot of people in this area and they want places to live, and this, you know, you'll get more units on this property than you would get single family homes. So I'm torn because like I'm going both ways in my head about it.
Well, I'm not torn. There you go.
Well, of course you're not torn.
Well, we'll just follow ours through, and everything you mentioned, guys, is correct. You're right. But you know, we do have a plan for this area. We do need the units. It's 32 units, and let's be honest, that 30% resource conservation area. When's the last time we had development come through that dedicated 30% of the land to resource conservation area? It's been a long time, and the connectivity. We know we need growth. But the 30% RCA, the fact that the connectivity, well, it's, you know, it's required by the UDO. So, but the fact that they're having to go to the two neighbors' properties just to connect to the road, and they're willing to build the road, that says a lot. And you're correct, the road, the widening on Green Level, I grew up in Green Level, but the widening on Green Level Church Road is really going to benefit that property owner when they sell across the street. I really probably should, I mean, you'd think it would fall on them more so than anybody, but because that's a huge parcel. But I realize the town and the neighbors' concerns, and I understand exactly what you're saying. But townhomes and single-family homes are not compared price-wise. They are two separate. Townhomes compared to townhomes, single-family homes compared to single-family homes. So I'm in favor, for sure.
Can I ask a question of Lauren? I'm curious, and having received the information that we did from Mr. Carpenter regarding the fact these are going to be a little bit larger, am I also correct in understanding that there is a condition in there that there could be no more than 4 homes per building?
Correct.
Okay.
It's limited to 4.
Okay. And so you're going to have theoretically 4 large units, from what I was hearing, 2,600 up to 3,000 square feet. Times 4 in one building. From a kind of a planning 101 perspective, one of the things that you really want to encourage in a situation like that is that those access major thoroughfares or your collector roadways and not travel through your lower density areas. And so let me ask this question: is the access out to Green Level Church, did I hear it being discussed as an option, or is it required? And so I'm curious if the developer ends up not doing that, and then we end up having 32 units that are all townhomes, which depends on the zoning ordinance as to whether or not they deem that attached single family or multifamily. And if they choose not to do that connection, do we then have essentially 32 multifamily units traveling out through single family?
So there is a condition that they can do a channelized right in, right out, and if not, if they don't have a connection to the public street, then they would have to connect with, I believe it's a side path or to get from Hillman Bend. And also, if they decide not to propose a direct public street access, then they would have to have a temporary construction entrance as, you know, part of their construction. But to answer your other part of the question, I think Russell might be the best to answer that, just from the way the transportation flow would go if there wasn't a connection point to Green Level Church Road, if you don't mind.
No, I don't mind, but before he comes up, so let's stick for a second to the land use and to the zoning side. So if they choose not to do that connection out to Green Level Church, they could still choose to do townhomes.
Correct. With the Plan Unit Development Conditional Zoning District, townhomes are allowed in the PUD CZ, which is also a permitted zoning district in the medium density residential.
Townhomes are permitted in North Carolina as single-family homes. They are not multifamily.
Okay.
Yeah, only apartments or family.
I will note that we have a motion and a second on the table. If the questions that you have will affect your vote or anybody else's, I will encourage them, but if not, I will ask that we close conversation.
Sure. No, I understand, and I'm willing to call the question. I think it was a reasonable ask, though, if they don't provide a connection out. But I appreciate Diane's response.
I will call a vote.
Thank you, Lauren.
All of those in favor? Okay, can we bring it back? All those in favor of rezoning case 24 level townhomes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No?
No.
Was that 3 no's? I didn't hear.
No.
2 no's? 3 no's. All right, that passes. I can't do math. That passes. Okay, item number 3. Public hearing and possible motion regarding rezoning case 24CZ17 Kelly Road Townhomes. Joshua.
Real quick, I just wanted to remind the dissenting votes that we do need your dissent form before you leave today. Thank you.
He said start with that. Okay.
Alrighty, good afternoon, everyone. Joshua Killian here, Planning Department, here to present rezoning case 24CZ17 Kelly Road Townhomes. This rezoning is located along Kelly Road between its intersection with Holland Road to the north and Old US 1 to the south. The land to be rezoned totals almost 6 acres across 2 single-family parcels, and there are streams and mature trees located on the parcels currently. The current zoning for this property is residential agricultural. The land to the south and east are zoned planned unit development conditional zoning and have been developed as townhomes as part of the West Village PUD. The zoning to the north is a continuation of the rural agricultural. To the west, across Kelly Road, is both residential agricultural at the corner of Holland Road and rural residential south of that property. The applicant is proposing to rezone the parcels to high-density, single-family conditional zoning. The applicant held 3 neighborhood meetings regarding this rezoning. These meetings were held on September 12th, November 12th, and November 27th of 2024. The rezoning case was heard by the Environmental Advisory Board on November 14th, 2024, and the rezoning case is offering 3 of the 4 suggested zoning conditions, which include allocations for EV charging on this development site and solar conduit within all residential units. The Town of Apex's Housing and Community Development staff recommended a 5% total ownership units to be dedicated to affordable housing at 135% AMI for the Raleigh MSA for a 20-year affordability period. The applicant has declined to add that zoning condition related to affordable housing. A Wake County Public Schools letter of impact was received for this rezoning case and indicates that elementary and high school grade levels in the current assignment area are anticipated to have insufficient capacity for future students. School expansion or construction within 5 years may address concerns at both the elementary and high school grade levels. I did want to note with the zoning conditions for this rezoning that all architectural zoning conditions provided are consistent with those provided within the West Village Plan Unit Development. This includes the provisions for townhomes, single-family, and duplex housing types, even though this rezoning is intent to build townhomes. As mentioned before, there are streams located on this tract of land. The environmental feature coincides with the elevation change on the land and is referenced in the transportation zoning conditions. That condition summarized would require right-of-way dedication along Kelly Road based on the 110-foot right-of-way section, including an 84-foot back-to-back curb and gutter 4-lane divided roadway with a 5-foot sidewalk and bike lanes, consistent with the Town of Apex bicycle and pedestrian plan map. Recognizing the streams may require U.S. Army Corps of Engineer or other permitting body approval for disturbance, a fee in lieu would be required for the road widening if the requirements of the condition cannot be met. Included in the rezoning is that a proposal for 5-foot sidewalks on both sides of the internal streets to match what is currently existing within the neighboring PUD. And there's also a condition that, under the consideration of the environmental impacts, that the developer will provide a stub street to the north on this parcel, PIN number 07313666481. But that location will be determined during master subdivision plan and construction drawings. The current 2045 land use map identifies these parcels as being in the community mixed use activity center, and the use classification on these parcels is mixed use, high density residential, office employment, commercial services. The proposed zoning district of high density single family conditional zoning is not an allowed zoning district within the high density residential classification. Therefore, if this rezoning is approved, the 2045 land use map will update and designate the rezoned land to medium-high density residential. Planning staff recommends approval of rezoning case 24CZ17 with conditions as submitted by the applicant. The proposed rezoning is reasonable and in the public interest, as it will maintain the residential density and character of the adjacent existing West Village PUD. And we did receive one email to the planning board, and so these were the neighbors who sent the email. Any questions for myself?
Any questions for Joshua?
All right.
I do have a question, I'm sorry.
Did I hear correctly, a fee in lieu for the, is that for the road?
Yes, if they are unable to get the permits from Army Corps of Engineers or any other permitting body, then.
Well, that would explain why.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that answers my question. Okay, thank you.
Joshua, can you share the comments that were indicated in the email? Just a summary. Oh, okay. Okay.
You'll have an opportunity to come up and speak.
Never mind. Thank you.
All right.
I have a question about affordable housing units.
Yes.
Were there affordable housing units? I know that was recommended.
It was recommended that 5% of all total units for ownership would be offered to 135% of the area median income for the Raleigh MSA. So,
but it was declined.
But it was declined.
Recommended, but it was declined.
Yes.
Thank you. Any additional questions for Joshua? All right. I do have, I believe the applicant has a moment to speak. And then ma'am, you're welcome to come up and speak when he is finished. I'll just need you to sign in. And Mr. Carpenter, you have 3 minutes.
Good evening again. Matthew Carpenter here this time on behalf of the property owner and developer. They're the same group here. I wanted to spend my time on this one discussing the land use map designation because as you can see in the staff report, it's a mixed use designation here, and obviously throughout Apex, whenever I see a mixed use land use map designation and a developer comes to me looking to do residential, it sort of sets off an alarm of, you need to tell them that Apex is preserving commercial areas to try to balance the tax base. Here, this particular site is unique, and I think the proposed amendment to the land use map is justified for 3 different reasons. The first is there's an existing stream on Kelly Road that runs roughly parallel with Kelly Road. And the issue there is that it would prevent any commercial uses from being pushed up towards Kelly Road, which really impacts the viability of commercial, because they really need visibility along a main transportation corridor. The second, and I think this is probably the biggest reason, is the built-out nature of the West Village PUD that's adjacent to the east and to the south. Those homes have been fully constructed, they've been sold, there are folks living there, and so putting high-density residential and commercial uses here would simply be incompatible. And so what we're proposing instead is a natural extension of that neighborhood. You can see there are 2 stub streets, one on Eva Pearl and the other Van Hook Lane. And so this site was envisioned for future development when West Village was developed, consistent with the land use map designation. And we took the architectural conditions in this case directly from the West Village PUD. And so the idea is for those units to be similar in size, scale, and character to the existing homes. The third reason, I think, justification for the land use map amendment is that there's a ton of commercial entitlement in the West Village PUD just south of here. There's up to 500,000 square feet of commercial zoning that was approved as part of the West Village PUD. So as it sits today, a developer could come into the town for that land with a commercial site plan and wouldn't have to go through rezoning, assuming that they met the other conditions of the West Village PUD. And develop that site for commercial. So, and that commercial was, I believe, intentionally sort of concentrated around the 540 interchange just south of here, so that there's a transition in land uses from that heavy commercial area up to 500,000 square feet to these more residential neighborhoods to the north. And so for those reasons, we respectfully ask for your recommendation of approval. Thank you.
Hello. My name's Rebecca Sanda. I'm the owner of 2077 Eva Pearl, which on this map is the end unit. I don't really have a way to show you, but can I show you? Can you see the mouse? Yeah, this end unit right here. We bought this a few years ago. We fled from Cary because Cary has been taking all of their beautiful green spaces, like what you have in Apex, and turning them into endless rows of housing and townhousing with no thought to the beautiful greenery that is what brought us to this part of the country in the first place. And so we paid $570,000 for an end unit, and we have a view of greenery all the way around. And then you also have these properties behind, which have roof decks and a view of the greenery. And so it sounds like seems to be, from what I've heard in the last discussion on approving a lot of these. If you do approve it, our ask is that there be a significant tree buffer between the houses that exist and what is coming in, because what we've seen in Cary and in other places is that the developers leave, 3 or 4 scraggly pine trees in between all of the homes, and it really diminishes, those of us who value the view of the green spaces and all of the quiet and the birds it attracts and everything else. We don't want to live in a parking lot with endless townhomes, so that would be our concern. And I don't know how this works, so what do you need me to sign? Or
Sign in
Sure.
for public record. We
Okay, thank you.
collect information. Thank you so much. I'll ask if there's anybody else, but I think that Mr. Rocher signed up. Did you want to?
I'm here to answer questions.
Thank you. All right, so I will close public comment or public hearing, and bring it back to the board. Thank you so much. The board for discussion and possible motion.
I have a question on the housing affordability statement, just the differences between each of them, and then a comment that Mr. Carpenter made during the last case, indicating, and I want to be careful here, I'm not calling you out in that matter, but I want to understand the AMI and where our policy resides relative to the AMI. And so in the last case, he had indicated that that would typically be reserved for up to 30% AMI. I want to make sure I got that statement right. And please wave your hands and if I didn't. And now we're hearing a comment regarding 135% AMI. Huge, enormous difference there. And so I'm curious from a staff perspective, what does the policy speak to relative to the AMI?
Josh, I'll invite you to come up, or Diane, and then I would encourage you to read up on the Housing Advisory Board and their work. It'll give you a lot more depth in detail. I hear that you want that detail. I'm here for it. Definitely encourage you to read up on it. But I'm glad you asked the question because I had a question about the housing affordability.
I am not equipped to answer that. I was not in the conversations about the affordable housing.
So just for your reference, our housing staff has those conversations with the applicant. And I know, at least in some of my conversations I've been in the past with these meetings, they look at the proposed project and look at what percentage AMI, especially for ownership and in different areas and different proposed projects, what could be supported by staff. There's been rezonings where the AMI for ownership was 110%, some at 120, some at 135. As housing prices go up, that percentage for ownership has had to go up to even make it feasible to have affordable units as a potential. But to speak to any discrepancy between the two rezonings tonight, only housing staff would be able to answer that question.
Okay, thank you. So that's the biggest takeaway for me, is that that's not a conversation being held with our planners. I mean, not to say that there's not planners involved in the housing staff, but that's an interesting takeaway for me, that the planners are not involved in that conversation. I would suggest or hope that they start being involved in those conversations. But
I don't think that might be a proper assessment.
Well, allow me to just share my own thoughts, Madam Chair. And so
I just wanted to correct the record that I don't think I don't think that's a correct assessment. I encourage you to share your own thoughts.
Sure.
I just want to clarify, I don't think that's the correct assessment.
Right. Well, sure. I think that this is a conversation that can be held and had during a rezoning like this. I think that obviously you're exactly right. There's a lot of reading I need to do, but I think these are certainly valid questions and conversations that can be had in an open public meeting in front of our citizens here as part of these projects that come forward, especially if there's a variance between very low AMI and AMI upwards of 135%. I mean, for example, just in our MSA here, a family of four, the AMI, just the at AMI is about $115,000 a year. So you might be surprised to find that figure from HUD is actually higher than many people realize. So 135% will, depending on the size of the family, clearly be in the six-figure range. And so I think it's a reasonable question. I think it's a reasonable conversation, and you're right. I need to educate myself more on this, and I will absolutely do just that.
I have a simple question. The townhomes that's adjacent to it, what's that current zoning?
That's plan unit development conditional zoning.
Thank you.
I potentially have a question for Mr. Carpenter, particularly about the site itself and how it could be developed, which might help address some of the concerns of the property owners across Eva Pearl Drive. So is that a stream that's in that across from that bank of homes between the stub on Eva Pearl and there? And if so, is that potentially developable? Or
Yeah,
are
so-
you gonna have to like just block that off as like these are just gonna be trees or?
Jeff, you want to come up? So my recollection is the stream in the bottom right-hand side of your screen, we don't know if that's jurisdictional or not. The streams along Kelly Road are 100% jurisdictional. And is that the, yeah.
Jeff Roach, Peak Engineering and Design, great question. The stream that comes from the north heading south, crossing Kelly Road, that's a perennial channel, 100-foot buffer either side. This one down here in the corner is, I believe, intermittent, and there's nothing on site. So the one down here in the corner here is not there.
Okay.
And this finger doesn't come up. It's just a little drainage ditch that comes up through here. We already had our environmental guys out there, so pretty confident answering the questions for you.
Thanks for clarifying.
When you say it's not on site, can you explain that?
It's not classified as a intermittent or perennial channel, which doesn't bring a buffer to it. And it's also not classified by the Army Corps as a wetland, so there's nothing stopping the road extension coming off at Eva Pearl. And you can kind of look at the picture and say, what's gonna happen? Well, there's gonna be an access off at Eva Pearl right here. It's gonna go straight up. We've committed to making a connection to the north for future development up there. And then Van Hook will come in and basically make a T intersection through here, so you can kind of get a really good idea for where those townhomes are gonna lay out. And there will be a buffer along that southern boundary based upon the ordinance standards, which I believe is a 20-foot buffer. I'm gonna say that, I think that's what the ordinance requirement is, but it'll be either a 10 or 20-foot buffer on that southern boundary. So that'll hopefully address a little bit of her question.
Jeff, the one that's parallel to Kelly, did you say that's 100 feet?
It's a 100-foot buffer on either side of the channel.
So that channel kind of bends as you move forward, as it moves north, it kind of bends. Do you know if it's 100 all the way?
I don't know how far it goes to 100. I know it completely on our side, it's 100 foot. I believe this is the buffer that's on the backside of Scotts Ridge Elementary School and the backside of Depot 499. At some point, it's going to transition from a 100-foot perennial channel down to an intermittent. I don't know where that transitions though. On our side, it's a 100-foot buffer for that entire length.
Okay, that's parallel to Kelly Road.
That's correct, and that's why that condition is in there about the Corps approval. Can we widen that road, get Corps approval? We've had a couple other conversations with Russell in the past and Chris Johnson in the past. We put that condition in there in the event that we don't have to come back and rezone if the Corps doesn't approve that. So yeah, that's a pretty robust buffer. Okay.
So we just wanted to clarify, it's a 15-foot type A.
Right in the middle, of course. Sorry. Thank you, Diane.
I do have a question, but I want to see if anybody else has additional questions.
I don't have questions, but I'd like to turn towards you and I guess I want to hear your thoughts on this because kind of your area.
Well, I think that if you look at it, look at the public comments that were made, there's nobody coming out outstandingly against this project. And it's mimicking the one that's next to it. So, and it's well north of the historic house that sits there. There are townhomes in between this and the historic house that's sitting there. So I think that the stream, I appreciate the attention paid to the stream. I know it's required, but I still appreciate it. And I think that unlike the previous one, this one shows much compatibility.
Thank you. I want to caution our board members to be, we're kicking off the new year, to be cautious with our words. Words do have meaning. We do actually have, I realize there's not a swarm of folks in here, but we do have a neighbor who not only sent an email, but who came this evening to voice her concerns. And I just want to note that words do have meaning, so please be cautious when we speak. When we speak about our neighbors. With that, my question, Mr. Carpenter, is I understand that you all decided to not go with the affordable housing recommendation from staff. But I am curious as to how there is no affordable housing attached to this development, which, to echo other comments, does appear to be compatible. The only thing I will add is that I actually appreciate and agree the potential of changing the land use map, which you will rarely hear me say. But I think that where this is developed, I think having office mixed use right there is at the moment just going to be very problematic. So I actually agree with that. It might be the first time in my couple of years up here, but would love an answer around the affordable housing.
Sure, absolutely. So just to be very clear, the staff recommendation in both of these cases was the same, 135% AMI for, I believe, 20 years. I may have the period mixed up, and at 5% of the total units. The primary issue on this one is the for sale nature of the affordable. I've talked to several different national builders about, these affordability commitments over the last year or two. And really the issue with the for sale units is the restrictive covenant that has to be recorded. And so, what some developers and builders have seen is they get these units built, and then there's a restrictive covenant, then private lenders are hesitant to give mortgages. And so, in some situations, the affordable units are getting built, there's a restrictive covenant recorded, and then the affordable buyers can't find financing because of the covenant. Whereas, for government subsidized, fully affordable projects, there's a different financing available to those buyers. Whereas here, where we're making the commitment voluntarily, they're going out on the open market and trying to get a mortgage. And so when that, the banks don't know how to handle, and the lenders don't know how to handle that restrictive covenant, because it's viewed as basically a cap on the appreciation of the home, which is their security for the loan. So that's a problem well beyond this case, and I know there are a lot of people smarter than me working on solutions to that. But without a builder, the properties owned by developers who are developing the lots, it's difficult to make the affordable housing commitment because these will be for sale. So that's the main issue.
And of course, we all, I'm sure, understand concerns around restricted covenants.
Right.
How that history connected to redlining would absolutely be something that would be a concern for myself as a neighbor, but also for banking individuals. So I think that naming that I think is important, and why there would be concerns. So that doesn't prevent the applicant. I think
that's right.
The previous project, right? I could see why there would be challenges around, and so I didn't even ask, right? Around housing affordability. The applicant could propose, say, hey, we can't do this, but we could do this, and I may have missed it, but I didn't see that.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, again, the recommendation from staff was for the for sale affordable units at the for sale affordable price of 135% AMI, and that's been, I don't want to say standard, but in most of these for sale cases, the staff recommendation is restrict 5% of units with a restrictive covenant, and then you back into the for sale affordable price, using an assumed estimated, monthly cost for utilities, all that type of stuff, and then it doesn't exceed 30%. I know you know this, but that's how we get to it, and so it's really the same issue in every case where it's a for sale project.
I'm gonna reframe.
Yeah.
Prior to the affordable housing incentives were recommended, there was a lot of discussion with housing staff, negotiation around what could potential be. So I am asking. I hear you and understand the concerns with this. To my colleague's point, I think there is some additional discussion. This is actually something the Affordable Housing Board, currently be disbanded, had lots of discussion around like revisiting what some of those incentives were, and are they working or are they not working? So this is absolutely a conversation for the staff. However, that does beg to differ. This seems like a perfect project to have some affordable housing that if that particular recommendation was not available, that maybe the applicant would say, we hear you, Apex, that you are looking for affordable housing for your teachers who will be just down the street at Scotts Ridge Elementary.
Right.
And for your firefighters who will be just down the street at the firefighting, the Apex fire station. Oh, and at the EMS station that's just down the corner.
Right.
We want our public servants to be able to live in our community. So,
Right.
Mr. Carpenter, is there a potential for a housing affordability projects as a part of this, that conversations could continue with housing staff around, we can't do what you have recommended, but we could do maybe this?
We're certainly open to hearing ideas if there's some other mechanism to, commit to affordability as part of a for sale project. I don't know exactly what that is. I know, in the overall discussion, not that this goes to capital A affordability, but in overall affordability, I think it's important in areas like this to add a mix of housing types. And I do think that positively impacts affordability. If we were to develop this site for example, 5 or 10 single family homes, those units would be definitely over $1 million a piece. The alternative is adding townhomes on sites like this that are under 10 acres, where it's an extension of existing neighborhood. And so I think that's adding to the housing supply in Apex, which does have a positive effect, albeit different than conditioning affordable units. But I do think that's part of the overall approach is, what's our zoning policy town-wide? And I think it helps to approve, more density in locations like this to add to the housing supply for folks that otherwise can't afford a single-family home. I mean, I know, some of the townhomes in this area, the woman that just spoke said hers was $570,000. 5 years ago, that was the price of a single-family home in this neighborhood. So I think the mix of housing types is important.
So am I hearing that if the board proposed recommended approval of this development with an addendum that the applicant go back to housing staff and try to come up with what would work? Am I hearing that would be an option?
We're happy to speak with housing staff. If there are additional sort of creative recommendations, we're happy to discuss those.
Don't know what the board will decide, but
You're right.
to ask that question. Okay, very good. Thank you so much. Any additional questions for Mr. Carpenter?
How many units are going in right now?
It's a maximum of 30.
Any additional questions?
Madam Chair, to your last comment there, for Joshua or for the ladies behind me, I don't believe in North Carolina. I believe the General Assembly has adopted legislation that we cannot condition affordable housing, that it must be incentivized or voluntarily offered as a condition. Is that correct?
I have not made a proposal and have not asked for a condition to her, but have not made a proposal. I will make a proposal, but I have not.
Well, I just would caution us against even creating a condition if that's something that we're not able to do.
Diane will not let me do that.
So just as clarification, you're saying that.
So a zoning condition can be anything that the developer would like to proffer, and it's fine to have a discussion about, are there any alternatives to what the staff had recommended? The staff recommendation triggers the incentive zoning policy with the incentives, but we have seen other rezonings come through with alternate affordable housing proffers. We cannot ask, planning staff cannot ask for specific things, and we also cannot recommend denial if there's not one proffered. But the town council looks at the rezoning as a whole, and they can decide if they think the rezoning is in the best interests of the community, looking at everything: transportation, land use, affordable housing, all that. So what I'm hearing is you would like for the developer to consider one of those alternatives, which we can give you other zoning cases that have gone through so you can get ideas, but we can't suggest any particular thing. As planning staff, the housing staff can per the incentive policy.
Josh, were you gonna add to that?
That covers.
Thank you, Diane.
I also wanted to make sure, Rebecca, that you heard, that there was a buffer that was not what Mr. Roach said. Sorry, Mr. Roach. Diane, that buffer was, along
15 feet.
Pearl.
It's a 15-foot type A, and I believe we're talking about along the property that is part of the existing PUD along Eva Pearl, which they have some area, you can
30
see.
feet.
It's about 30 feet. So total, there'll be about 45 feet.
I wanted to make sure that you heard that, because I know that was one of the.
And then
So-
what would be the buffer from my neighbors who have the roof decks on that
15.
vertical side there? Because
So
they're not here, but they're not counted.
as clarification, the buffer that would be provided by this project is only based on their property. So the total space that we were alluding to of 45 feet would be from the right of way of Eva Pearl, as your development currently owns this parcel here and this sliver here as its own buffer. So the buffer would have to be 15 feet from property line in to the development. And based on the zoning, it would be the same 15 feet type A on the east as well because of the zoning of planning and development conditional zoning.
Right, so on that east side, they have an existing 10-foot.
It's about 15 feet between the rear property line of those units to the property line of the subdivision.
So on that side, it's about 30 feet.
So there'll be, and then buildings are 10 feet off of the buffer. So there'll be more.
Thank you, Joshua.
Joshua, if I could just add one thing, I would not go so far as to add this as any kind of a condition on a motion, but I would just encourage, as part of your statement of consistency, I appreciate and am glad that we've had this lengthy conversation about the creeks and the environmental features associated with the site, and I know Mr. Carpenter touched on that as it relates to the current policy, and that the site just doesn't work for non-residential. Maybe even adding a comment or a growing your statement of consistency to address the environmental features are also prohibitive from being able to develop the site as non-residential. So I'd just toss that out there as a consideration.
So the full planning board would have to make that recommendation in order to include it. If there's a dissenting vote, you can include those on the dissenting vote page.
Okay. Well, then I will then. I will move approval of request CZ 24CZ17 with the conditions as proffered. And with a recommendation that the statement of consistency be modified to include addressing the environmental features of the site are prohibitive of non-residential development as it might call for along Kelly Road.
Could I ask if you would add a friendly amendment of encouraging the applicant to continue conversations with housing staff to come up with a reasonable condition for affordable housing?
Yes, I would. I appreciate the explanation that and forgive me, I can't recall if it was Diane or if it was Amanda who was providing the explanation that zoning staff cannot do that, planning staff cannot do that, but that is something that the housing staff has the ability to do through their policy. So I would accept your friendly amendment.
Joshua, Diane, did you get all that?
No, I'm having trouble with this one, but
Do you want me to restate it?
just 1 second.
Basically, we just had a
Alright,
mistake.
so I have, the recommendation is approval, as presented. Additional recommendation that statement consistency include the fact that environmental considerations make non-residential development
Difficult or prohibitive on the site.
difficult or prohibitive. And there was a recommendation that
Madam Chair.
That the applicant return to conversations with housing staff to come up with an affordable housing option. That the one recommended by staff did not work, and so that they will go back to housing staff to come up with one that will work.
It does. We'll talk to housing staff.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, did we get that?
I think so. So additional recommendation that the applicant return to conversations with housing staff to come up with an affordable housing option since the one originally recommended by staff will not work.
Yes.
Well, yeah, I want to be careful there because if it's worded that way, we're conditioning our recommendation of approval to the elected body that this must include an affordable housing component.
That is my intent. If you do not accept my amendment, that is fine.
I don't
but
think that you can
is
do
my
that.
So the wording was conversation, not condition. So the motion amendment is to have a conversation.
Continue having.
To continue, yes, and not to proffer a condition. So there may not be a condition as a result, but there will be conversation.
Because the current one
I
did
agree
not
with
work.
Joshua.
That looks good.
Okay.
Is everybody?
Well done,
Do
Joshua.
we need to
Thank you.
does everybody get that?
So now I have additional recommendation that the applicant return to conversations with housing staff to consider an affordable housing condition since the one originally recommended by staff will not work for the developer.
Yes.
I would agree with that.
That is who it doesn't work for.
Yes. All right. That was a motion. Thank you so much for that. Is there a second?
I could second that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that passes unanimously. And with that, I just need one more motion.
Make a motion to adjourn.
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Who seconded the adjournment?
Sarah?
Always the second.
Sorry.